Welcome to our third summer series webinar. Again, my name is Stephanie DePaco. I'm Vice President of Insurance Services here at PayEntry. PayEntry and eComp have been working together for many years. Today, Rob Campbell at eComp is going to be going over products that will help protect your employees and your business. That's going to be followed by Brett Strauss, who will discuss HR risk management for small businesses. We're going to have a quick Q&A, and then we're going to close with a HR services and insurance services overview. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rob for his presentation.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, Brett, Dina, everybody at PayEntry for sponsoring this session. And thank you to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend this webinar. I'm Rob Campbell, Vice President of Partner Strategy with eComp. eComp is an insurance agency that specializes in commercial insurance, especially workers' compensation, employment practice liability, and some of those products that integrate with the PayEntry platform. We also specialize in commercial risk and claims management for our clients. And that's really where I've spent my entire 20-year career, focused on payroll integrated insurance, risk management, and human resource solutions. They all integrate and build upon each other so much. That background really gives me, what I think is a unique combination of knowledge and skills that are relevant to all businesses. I've got a lot of personal experience as well as a business owner. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and I have a business of my own outside of eComp. So with my family and my personal experience owning a business and combined with my professional experience in risk management, I've got firsthand understanding of the day in your life, right? The day in your life of a business owner. And it's fun, right? The highs can be really, really great, and the lows can be low. And so I have a passion for really helping my clients and other business owners and people I partner with to succeed in their entrepreneurial journey. And it's important to know that you can build a phenomenal business, but if you're not managing and transferring your risk correctly, be that your risk as an employer, your HR practices, your liability risk, all of those things, all of that effort and energy and passion can be put in jeopardy. So I always like to say one of the best services that I offer is allowing stressed out business owners just like yourself sleep better at night, which is a very underrated component of being an insurance professional. I say very often, we'll talk about it in today's session, there really hasn't been a harder time in the history of employers to employ people. You're taking on a very noble task and also a very risky task. And managing your employment risk is a critical function for a successful business today. And so in this webinar today, we'll talk about that. We'll talk a lot about risk management, HR infrastructure, and transferring some of that risk. This is my third session of the season, my third and final. So I like to take a little trip down memory lane, right? And think back to kind of where we've come over the last couple of months. And starting in July, right? In July, we covered the basics of workers' compensation, what it is, why it's important, and a better way for you to manage your workers' compensation premiums with a pay-as-you-go platform that you can take advantage of through your partnership with PayEntry. You learned that with pay-as-you-go workers' compensation, you can eliminate your annual workers' comp down payment. You can pay your premiums on a pay-as-you-go basis based on the actual wages that are paid, the same way that you pay your payroll taxes. And by using PayGo, you can eliminate or at least significantly streamline your annual workers' compensation audit while eliminating that risk of the unexpected lump sum payments that come due from time to time with your workers' comp policy. In that session, you also walked away with an understanding that workers' comp is not a set cost, and the premium that you pay is very competitive. And the cost for workers' comp can be controlled by your actions, right? You learned what the experience mod is and how it applies to your policy as a non-negotiable reward or punishment. And hopefully you set a goal for yourself to implement safety infrastructure as well as human resource practices that put you in position to control your workers' compensation costs over a multi-year period. And if you need help, or if you still need help, hopefully you have reached out to eComp or you reached out to PayEntry for support. Keep in mind, the best time if you haven't reached out for support is always today, and the worst time is always tomorrow, right? So you attended these sessions for a reason. Take full advantage. In August, we turned the page. We took a little bit of a deeper dive into the topic of workers' compensation and actionable ways that you can control those costs. We talked about the impact of claims frequency versus claim severity and the impact that each of those has on your workers' comp experience mod. And that drives one of the components of your overall insurance costs. You learned about discounts that you can earn from implementing HR practices and having company policies and implementing things like a drug-free workplace, return to work programs, and managed care of your workers' comp claims. We talked about the importance of workplace culture and how to implement a culture of safety that starts at the top of your company. And finally, we talked about the importance of making sure that your insurance agent is doing their job, working as hard as you are, and bringing you solutions to address your insurance costs. If you aren't sure who your agent is, or if they aren't working for you, I showed you a great way that you can use an instant quote tool through eComp and PayEntry to instantly shop your insurance. So if you attended those sessions, thank you. Hopefully you found some valuable information and you implemented them. If you didn't, PayEntry makes it really, really easy for you to access those sessions on demand. Knowledge fuels growth and margin in your business. So I highly recommend that you consume as much of that content as you can, as often as you can, or even better, send your leadership team there to go watch and report back how they're going to implement those things. So that leads us to our third and final session, or my third and final session. And today we're going to talk about protecting your people and your business through employment practice liability and HR risk management. As I led, and as I always lead, there's never been a more difficult time to be an employer. And there's an evolving, complicated web of government regulation. There's an ever-growing lack of personal accountability across certain segments of the workforce, an increased sense of entitlement in general within the population, and instantaneous knowledge access, sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but instantaneous knowledge access at everyone's fingertips. And as an employer, you are taking on that very noble task of creating jobs and providing opportunities for people in your community, and more than ever, providing opportunities for the remote workforce around the country. And in a perfect world, you are rewarded for that with asset creation. In an unfortunate world, you are litigated against and have actions taken against you for things that you did, or even worse, for things that your employees did within your organization. So in our short time today, we'll explore common risks that you have as an employer. We'll learn how HR practices, along with employment practice liability insurance, is a critical function in your overall risk management strategy as an employer. So let's talk about concerning trends that probably aren't a very big surprise to you, right? Data shows that there continues to be a steady increase in complaints filed with government agencies, including the EEOC, right? The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The rise in accusations is expected, right, to an extent for topics like discrimination, retaliation, harassment, and others. But there's also a significant growth trend in broader accusations, right? Things that maybe you haven't experienced in the past or aren't at the tip of your tongue. And that includes things like wage and hour disputes, independent contractor misclassifications, right? W-2 employees versus 1099s, salary versus hourly. We talked about the large risk that independent contractors pose to you as an employer, as an employment relationship. In some of our previous sessions, it applies to workers' comp, and independent contractors pose a ton of risk for overall employment as well. We're seeing a rise in accusations and litigation costs around ADA accommodations. And with a remote workforce, we're seeing it around data and privacy risks. We have a contentious political climate filled with a lot of passionate and potentially opposing views that may be getting pulled into the workplace, right, and creating hostilities, bullying, right? So many things, and it's not just the EEOC. There's dozens of government agencies nationwide that exist to protect employees. There is zero government entities that I'm aware of that exist to protect you as the employer. Employees have the Department of Labor, and they have the FEPA agencies, right? The Fair Employment Practice agencies. They have state and federal OSHA, the Department of Justice that they can go to, and they also have thousands of law firms nationwide seeking to find employees with hurt feelings, right? I talk in our workers' comp sessions, there's one thing that workers' comp doesn't cover, and it's your employees' hurt feelings. And your employees' hurt feelings pose some of the biggest risks to you as an employer. There's greater awareness in the marketplace today of employees' rights, and there's an constantly evolving workplace demographics as well as locations, right? And what remote workers have brought into this. You as an employer may have in the past only had to contend with your state and local regulations, and now you may have employees in different jurisdictions and different states and scattered around, and having employment laws apply to you that maybe you're not an expert in. So it's important, right? Knowledge is important. Seeking help is important. Managing all of these things is important, right? How do you protect yourself? What do you do? As an insurance expert, right, I'm going to tell you the foundation is and will always be your sound HR practices. That's where it starts, right? I can only help you so far as an insurance professional if you don't start with sound HR practices as an employer. And honestly, those practices start before you even have an employee, right? Before an employee actually becomes an employee. You'll hear it called, and I refer to it as from hire to retire, right? Or more negatively, and even more importantly, from hire to fire. And evaluating your hiring practices, including things like very simple foundation, very important foundation, having detailed job descriptions, right? You should have detailed job descriptions for every position in your company. Having fair employee screening processes and making sure that any hiring managers know what they can and cannot ask during the interview process. And supporting all of that with training, right? Making sure that people in leadership positions are aware of all of these things. Because, listen, I give you all the benefit of the doubt. I give everybody on your team the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say, I don't think in the general case, a lot of these things that happen are done purposefully, right? But innocent questions, casual conversations, things can be taken out of context, right? And the expectation is that you as an employer are perfect, no matter how unreasonable that is, and so you want to target that whenever possible. Establishing a sound, legally reviewed company policies and communicating them, often via a handbook, is another critical and important function. I'll tell you, and we're going to talk about employment practice liability insurance here. If you don't have employment practices, I can't give you an insurance policy for your employment practice liability, right? The insurance company is always looking for the foundation to defend you, right? And you have to provide that foundation, right? In the event of an employment accusation or employee accusation, you have to be able to provide the documentation, you have to be able to tell the story, and you need to be able to do it in a very sound manner, right? Because if you look at criminal law, right, in criminal law, you are innocent until proven guilty. And in the world of employment law, it's more or less you are guilty until proven innocent, right? The burden of proof is much higher on you to prove or defend that something didn't happen, more than it is on an accuser's need to prove that it did happen. And having a foundation of HR practices, right? Focusing on your company culture, focusing on training within your organization and preparing people, right? I mean, I'm an educated professional. A lot of you are educated professionals. You don't have to be, right? But I'll tell you, if you didn't, whether you did or you didn't, we didn't get training for this. As I, went to school, I didn't get training for these things when I, pursued my insurance licenses and my insurance designations. You need help, right? You need help from HR experts, whether you hire somebody and bring that expertise within your company, which is, often not feasible, right, in a small business, or not a great financial hire. I always also question when you bring that internally as a hiring manager, do you get that level of expertise, right? I mean, in my past working for a large corporation, they had a massive HR department filled with experts. And in my small business expertise, generally, an HR person comes with some limited capabilities, but often it doesn't come with any capabilities, right? It comes with like, hey, you're the people person, right? Everybody likes you. You're HR. And so having that support network around you, outsourcing that, using the tools that are available to you to implement training and performance management and documented processes, critical. Because again, if an accusation is made, burden of proof for defense is on you. And when you transfer that risk to an employment practice liability insurance policy, the insurance company is going to look for what defense have you set up? What are your HR processes? What are they defending you against? Because an accusation doesn't always mean payday, right? If we look at litigation, stuff's going to happen, right? Things are going to happen within an organization. But defending yourself and saying, yeah, like, okay, one employee made this comment or took this action or whatever, and from a company standard, from company level, we have a non-harassment policy. We have a non-discrimination policy. We communicate to all of our employees. We provide them training on all of those things. We have a disciplinary policy if an employee violates those. You want to be able to stand up and defend yourself as the employer to say, I've taken all the appropriate actions. I'm being a responsible employer. Yes, something still happened. Have some mercy, but I have a process within my company to defend this. Versus having to stand up and say, I don't provide my employees discrimination and non-harassment training. I don't have company policies about that I communicate and have signed off on. I don't have progressive discipline. I'm just kind of winging it as an employer and figuring this stuff out. Bad day standing up in front of that, right? Document. It's unfortunate, but as the employer, knowing when, where, and how to document employment-related functions in your business is critical if and when accusations happen. And remember, everybody's very happy until the moment they're not, right? And a happy employee can become an unhappy employee very, very fast, right? So treat all of those situations the same, regardless of the employee's current disposition towards you as their employer. Now, PayEntry can help you with that. There's a lot of resources around within PayEntry, outside of PayEntry, within your company. So there's also risk transfer, right? Because why is all of that necessary? Well, I'm going to say, welcome to America, where you can be sued at any time for any reason, and you have to defend yourself, right? It's a very unfortunate truth that you as an employer, leaders within your organization, other employees can be accused of anything at any time, and you got to defend yourself. And defense is expensive, right? Attorneys charge a lot of money to defend you, and not hiring an attorney and trying to defend that yourself can get even more expensive as you make mistakes through that. We talked earlier, government support is not in your favor, right? Tons of organizations, tons of government entities, tons of people out there that are there to assist your employees with these things, and nobody from a government standpoint to help you necessarily, right? So you got to rely on your partners in business to help you. You got to rely on your HCM providers. You got to rely on your insurance professionals. HR infrastructure is the foundation of your defense. It's critical. And this is also really, really important, because what I like to highlight again, I think what I just said is, I believe as a business owner, I believe as a leader, people aren't, for the most part, knowingly out there harassing and discriminating and retaliating and doing all of those things. But things can be taken out of context. But even separate from that, you may not be on your job site every single day. You may not be in your office every single day. You probably have a leadership team that reports to you as the business owner, who are making decisions and taking actions and doing these things on behalf of you as the employer. And you can get sued, right? You can end up in very sticky situations for things that they do. So after you have established a strong HR foundation, right? You have your job descriptions, you have your company policies, you've communicated those things, you've documented everything. You've leaned on your partners or internally to set up that HR infrastructure. What comes next is transferring that remaining risk through an employment practice liability insurance policy. EPLI is an insurance that covers claims against your business by employees for actions like discrimination, wrongful termination, retaliation, misclassified employees, wage and hour violations, right? All of those things, right? It's on you to defend yourself first, but I'll tell you, even with absolutely perfect HR infrastructure, it's not a magic bullet. This is still America. You can still be sued at any time for any reason. And so the employment practice liability is going to transfer that remaining risk that you have. Now, for a quick clarification, some people confuse this, because I know I spent our first two sessions very focused on workers' compensation. And you may be looking at your insurance policy saying, well, okay, I'm good. My workers' compensation policy has employer's risk. And so don't confuse the two, right? Employer's risk exists for third parties that may sue you on behalf of an injured worker, right? A spouse, a child, a family member. The employee may not be able to litigate against you for a normal workplace injury, but a family member may be able to, especially if negligence can be proven. And so that's the employer's liability portion of your workers' comp. Employment practice liability is separate, because remember, your workers' comp policy does not care about your employees' hurt feelings, and it does not respond to your employees' hurt feelings. Your employment practice liability insurance policy does, and it provides risk transfer. It's going to pay for legal defenses, right? The moment that an accusation has occurred, maybe even before then, right? Maybe even when a circumstance has presented itself, you're going to contact your EPLI provider and you're going to make them aware, and you're going to seek some advice from them on how to handle that, right? You're going to do that in conjunction with your HR professional, immediately take action and usually get a lot of documentation, right? And proceed forward in the right way. The EPLI policy is going to pay for settlements and judgments, right? So if the accusation has merit, right, if it's valid, then the employment practice liability is going to pay for that, right? Maybe that's lost wages, right, because of a situation that impacted that employee. Very often it's just paying everybody's legal defenses, right, which just rack up, right, and they're entitled to. The employment practice liability policy is going to respond to a wide range of claims, right, related to employment. Wrongful termination. Again, go back to accountability, personal accountability in the world today, right? Not a strength these days, seemingly, unfortunately, right? So does an employee who gets terminated take responsibility for the actions that got them into that situation? Or do they respond and say that you terminated them wrongfully, that you treated them some other way than another employee who maybe did the same thing or similar, right? Did you terminate them because they made an accusation against somebody? Did you terminate them because they went out on paid family leave? Did you terminate them because of an illness that they have? I would say no, you probably didn't, right? But it doesn't mean that the accusation can't take place. It'll respond to discrimination, right? All of the protected classes, race, gender, age, disability, right? Again, is that because of wrongful termination? Did you not promote somebody because of that? Did you not hire somebody, right? Because your employment practice exposure starts before you even have any employees, right? So does somebody feel like you made a hiring decision based upon a discriminatory component? Harassment, bullying, right? Bullying being a very aggressively rising claim and accusation. Workplace hostility, the policy will respond to. Whistleblower claims, right? There's a lot of government agencies that you can file complaints to or make aware of, and your employer can't retaliate against you, right? OSHA, are you concerned about an unsafe working environment, right? And an employee makes that accusation, or do they get terminated for something, right? And then they make that claim, and you didn't even know that they were the ones that contacted OSHA. Who knows, right? Failure to promote, failure to hire. Two big ones, right? Again, when you have multiple candidates applying for a position and one of them doesn't get it, do they feel like they were more qualified? That's an opinion, right? That's an opinion that can cause you a lot of problems. Getting back to your documentation and your job descriptions and all of those things. And of course, defamation, invasion of privacy in the context of employment, right? That is another accusation that is growing a lot, in part as a result of a evolving workforce that is remote. Your employment practice liability insurance can also respond to third-party claims. Yes, you don't even have to be an employer to get yourself sideways on employment related accusations, right? I think I shared in one of the last sessions. We had a client get subrogated against. So a UPS driver, right, was terminated, and said that as they were delivering packages to this location, that the employees were making rude comments and harassing nature, and that employee had casually brought that up to their manager, not aggressively, just to the manager's feedback. It was just in passive conversation, never asked for any actions to be taken. The employee doesn't necessarily have to ask for those actions to be taken. And then when they were terminated, they brought a wrongful termination claim. And, the provider paid that claim and then sued the wrongful party, right? That's a third party claim. You now have an employment related accusation against as a result of an employee that you don't even employ. So you can see, I use that example to show you like how broad this can be and how unexpected it could be. Another important component of the employment practice liability policy is not only responding to those and paying legal defenses and all the costs around it, but crisis management and reputational harm, right? Because you don't want to be known as that employer. You don't want that to grow beyond. You don't want the local news reporter to pick this up on a slow media day, right, or whatever it may be. So they're going to help you with that PR, right, and that crisis management and that reputational harm and the things that go around that. Because again, that's just another level of expertise and responding to that you may not personally have as a business owner, or you may not have within your company. So I highly encourage every company that I talk to, every company that I consult, I recommend that they secure an employment practice liability policy for themselves. It's a very affordable coverage, and it's a financial safety net for employee-related disputes. It gives you legal defense and settlement coverage, so a single employment claim doesn't threaten your business. It also allows you to have some professionals respond to that claim and allow you to continue to run your business. Because one of the things that we didn't talk deeply about is how much time gets taken off of your plate as an employer responding to those accusations. So if you don't have a policy, I highly recommend you pursue one. The coverage is incredibly affordable. I also say it's often the inverse of workers' comp, right? If you have a very affordable workers' comp policy, as far as your rate per $100 of payroll, your employment practice liability might be a little bit more expensive. And right, I'm speaking to the professionals out there, the law offices, the medical practices, the dentists, the sales organizations. Workers' comp, very affordable. Employment practice liability, a little bit more on the expensive side. If you're a carpenter, you're a plumber, you're an electrician, you have a lot of those things. The claims aren't as common in those industries. They absolutely exist. You still have a huge risk. For those of you working on those job sites, I put myself through college, in fact, doing roofing and siding. It's a little bit thicker skin when those people are yelling at each other sometimes. Still have the risk. Highly recommend you carry a policy. Critically important they have HR infrastructure, but just as a little bit of an indicator of your premium size, as well as having assets, right? Unfortunately, the more you have, the more people want to take. So protect your assets, transfer your risk, prevent with your infrastructure, and then transfer with an insurance policy. I'm going to leave you with today, there's no greater wealth in this world than peace of mind. What I provide to business owners, what PayEntry provides to business owners is peace of mind, right? I hope that when you purchase these insurances. I hope that as you look and you set up your HR infrastructure as an employer, you sleep better at night, because you should, right? Put all the steps in place, put the infrastructure in place, transfer the remaining risk, and get some sleep. It's tough for you out there as a business owner. I want to thank everybody for their time today. Again, I'm Rob Campbell with eComp. Thank you so much to my partners at PayEntry for hosting these 3 sessions. Let me stop and see, Dina, any questions out there?
Thank you, Robert. We do have one question. This is from Jamie. Jamie is in Ohio. Jamie is asking, what is the fastest and easiest and cheapest way to get started?
Yeah. So reach out to PayEntry. They can get you in touch. My contact information is on the screen. I can get you in touch with somebody as well on my team. I'm going to avoid the cheapest way. As an agent, we will take your business out to market, right? We partner with more than 25 insurance companies, so we will make sure that that we present you to all of our carrier partnerships and come with the most competitive rate. I don't use cheap because I don't want you to jeopardize coverage, right? Some policies will exclude certain perils, right? They may exclude wage and hour violations. They may exclude third-party accusations. And you may be okay with retaining that risk. But what I want to do as an insurance professional is present a few options to you from the market and get an understanding of what should your premium be and what are the pros and cons of carriers that offered you coverage.
Yeah, and I think, that's a great point that you make, Rob, about some of the excluded risks and perils. And one of the conversations that we usually have together is just a cost benefit analysis. Let's just say, for using round numbers, Rob says, you know what, I can get you a policy and let's say it's going to be $100 and it has absolutely everything, but for $50, it's going to exclude then wage and hour coverage. Obviously, those of you that are out here in California where wage and hour issues are through the roof, we have that conversation. Okay, so it's a $50 savings. How about, well, it looks like, PayEntry on the HR side, we can add some HR compliance, coverage, some proactive help to make sure that you have things buttoned up. And now maybe you get pretty close, but you're only at $75 a month, right? So you didn't buy the full boat on the employment practices liability, but you have the coverage that Rob gave you. You have PayEntry looking out after you on the HR side and building that solid foundation. And now you're tucked in at night, sleeping very well at $75 instead of $100. It doesn't work for everyone, but that's why I'm here, right? That's why for these last few sessions I've been in here, and Stephanie, the 3 of us together, are well versed in how to identify these risks and how to have these conversations, so that when we're talking to you, we can kind of point out some of those hidden landmines that you might not be seeing, down there in the weeds, and we can have this conversation and make sure that, all the cards are on the table. And then ultimately, it's your decision as the business owner. Hey guys, I only have, $60 that I can spend every month. That's the most that I can afford. Okay, great. You know what, if that's what you have, then you know what, we'll work together. Brett, Rob, Stephanie, we'll figure out how to spend that $60 for you so that you're getting the most coverage, in all those areas, and that you're aware of where, there might be some minor holes, and you can manage, your business accordingly. So nothing's ever going to just land on your plate and completely catch you off guard.
We thank you, Brett and Robert. We have another question from Mike. Mike is asking about that he has had workers' compensation claims in the past. Will that affect being able to apply for the pay-as-you-go coverage?
Oh, not necessarily. Claims for workers' comp are expected to an extent. It is a policy that prepares and expects to handle claims. So it depends on the scenarios. As an insurance agent, we're going to gather that information. We're going to talk to you about what happened and what did you do to, if anything, prevent that from happening in the future. So no, It shouldn't. Now, if you have a huge, frequency problem and you have a reoccurrence of the same claims and your response is, well, it's just bad luck. The insurance company doesn't love that stuff. So scenario based, but no, we have thousands of clients that have claims. We field claims for our clients on pay-as-you-go policies on a daily basis.
I know some of you that are on this call today have worked with me and my team before. We've gone through an HR audit, but that's kind of what I wanted to kind of end this call with today. The HR audit is probably our most valuable tool that we have to offer on the compliance side at PayEntry. What that entails is about a 2 to 3 hour meeting with me. And we sit down and we pull back the covers on all of these things that Rob's talking about, okay? And we're looking at, how are you finding candidates? What does that process look like? How are you onboarding them? How are you training them? How are you coaching them? Do you have performance reviews? What types of benefits do you offer? How are you determining your compensation scale? So we look through absolutely everything, right? Like Rob said, from hire to retire. And then we provide a report card, okay, based off of the conversation that we've had together, based off of some documents that you've shared with me and I've been able to inspect. Here's where you fit in, along this kind of, graded curve, and compared to your competitors and other, small businesses in your area. And then we can make recommendations based off of that. Hey, you're doing a very, very good job, but it looks like, you might be, not necessarily, you don't have the best rates on the insurance because X, Y, and Z. You don't have the drug-free workplace plan. You don't have this, you don't have that. And then we fix it for you. We don't just tell you that, you have a leak in your roof. Say, hey, you know what? We got it covered for you. We're going to actually do the work. We're going to fix that for you. We can get Rob and his team involved so that they can then, go back to market and help you, take a look at these policies when they're up for renewal, because it's a whole package, right? And there's no obligation. We're not here to sell you services that you don't need. Okay, it's about helping you understand how all of these things are intertwined, right? And the thing that frustrates me the most is that, especially being here in Southern California, everything that comes across my desk, it can be avoided with proactive conversation, right? Figuring, hey, today, like Rob said, not tomorrow, today, let's figure out, what have you got? Where might you be predisposed to some risk, whether it's the industry that you're in or the type of employees that you hire or both. And let's put that, out in front of us and just tackle the elephant in the room together so that we can, we can move forward and you'll feel comfortable with the controls that you have in place. The other thing that, when I'm conducting these HR audits and we're having these candid conversations, a lot of people are asking, well, about, cost of insurance. And Rob, you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong, but most states, have, insurance commissioners, departments, and it's very heavily regulated. Okay. It's very rare that you're going to find, you look at different carriers and the costs are going to be so far out of control. It's usually somewhere in the same ballpark. The most important thing when you're talking about insurance is going to be the responsiveness and the relationship that you have with whoever's providing you your coverage. Okay. And I'll leave it at this, is that if you don't have somebody that's as thorough as Rob, that is, as thorough as Stephanie and, the team that we have at PayEntry, then it might be worth having a conversation with those guys. Hey, look, what might it cost? How can you support me? Well, geez, I've had my workers' comp with the same, company for the last 10 years, and I've never heard any of this, Rob. Well, that's usually where I see the issues, right? Is that, we just keep auto renewing with the same carrier, and nobody's really going out there and doing the homework, doing the digging to help you understand why. Like, why are you on an auto renewal? Is there something, more affordable out there? Has your business grown and maybe you've outgrown this carrier and there's something else available for you in a different company? The person that you're working with, on the insurance side should be rolling up their sleeves and answering those questions for you, at least asking them and then providing you the answers. And look, pay entry was built off of relationships. I'm a big proponent of relationships. But if you don't have somebody that's looking out for your best interest and is asking those difficult questions, then it might be time to have a conversation with Brett, with Rob, with Stephanie, to see what we might be able to do to support you.